Hey guys, welcome back to Sparkman Homestead. Here is another week's worth of meals for you. So for the very first meal, we are going to make a baked honey garlic pork chop. Now, I usually read the reviews before I make a recipe just because I don't want to waste any food if the recipe is absolutely horrible. So this review actually suggested that I double the sauce mixture. The measurements on the original recipe, so this is what she is suggesting for the original recipe, is what I'm first starting out with. And it is 2 tablespoons of honey, 4 cloves of garlic minced, 2 tablespoons of a low sodium soy sauce, 1 tablespoon ketchup, half a tablespoon of sweet chili sauce, and then half a teaspoon of dried oregano. So I realized after I got all of those products mixed together that I wanted to double it because all of the reviews said double it, it's not saucy enough, and we love sauce. So I just kind of went back and just added a little bit more ingredients of everything just to kind of double it. So what I ended up doing, again, because of the reviews, is I actually ended up only putting just maybe a quarter of that sauce into a shallow bowl, and then I just lightly coated my pork chops with that sauce. Somebody in the reviews actually suggested holding back some of the sauce and making it like almost a thicker version of it. So I initially thought I was going to do that. So here I am just getting my pork chops nice and coated with that mixture, and then I'm going to put about a tablespoon of avocado oil into a 12-inch skillet, and I'm just going to fry these pork chops for about 2 minutes on each side. I am not completely cooking them through, I just want to brown them. So while they were doing the browning, I'm just getting some of my frozen cauliflower from my spring garden that I put in the freezer that I preserved. I'm just getting that put into the microwave. We're going to have that on the side. So here I am just flipping the pork chops again. I'm not trying to cook them, I'm just trying to get them nice and brown on both sides. Once they were brown, I'm going to come in and add about 2 tablespoons to this skillet. And what I chose to do is take the remainder of that sauce that we had made up earlier and just pour it onto the pork chops. And then we are going to put these into a 400-degree oven, and we are going to cook these for approximately 15 to 18 minutes or until cooked through. It says that the internal temperature should be about 145 degrees on these. It was perfect that because these pork chops were pretty thin. If you're using a thicker pork chop, you probably will have to let that cook a little bit longer, but that was perfect time for those ones. And then I just made a simple macaroni and cheese for the side, and then we had that cauliflower, and this was really a delicious pork chop recipe. I find it hard to find good pork chop recipes, and this one was definitely a delicious one. For the next meal, we are going to make a garlic chicken Alfredo bowl. This is one of my most favorite meals. I used to make this for my kids all the time when they were little, and I just love it. Now, I've definitely changed the way I made it over the years. Back then, I had very limited knowledge on packaged goods and the stuff that is in them and that they're not super good for you. So I used to just buy the Alfredo package mix and use that in this. I've since learned that making it from scratch is number one, cheaper and way better for you. So that's kind of how I've modified it a little bit from there. So what we're going to do is take about 1 pound of boneless, skinless chicken breasts, and we are going to cut them into little bite-sized pieces, and we're just going to sear them until they are completely cooked through. Once they're cooked through, we're going to put them aside. What I was doing there was also getting some of my broccoli just put into my steamer basket, and we're going to have that with this all as well. To make the Alfredo sauce, you want to take 4 tablespoons of butter and melt it, and then you're going to add 2 large garlic cloves minced to that butter. Wait for the garlic to get nice and fragrant, and then you're going to slowly whisk in a 1/4 cup of flour. I just used an unbleached all-purpose flour there. You're going to stir it until the flour becomes nice and brown and nutty smelling, and then you're going to take 3 cups of warmed whole milk. You could probably use plant-based milk, and in fact I think I have used plant-based milk to make this before. You're going to slowly whisk in that warm milk until it gets nice and thick. Once it is thick, it usually takes about 5 minutes. You're going to turn the element off, so turn the heat off, and you are going to stir in 2 cups of a grated Parmesan cheese. I am just using a fresh grated here. I have found that the fresh grated Parmesan tends to melt a little bit easier than the pre-ground stuff that you can get in that green bottle. It's just, that's what I found, it works a little bit better. So you're gonna season with salt and pepper. I came in and just seasoned it with about 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of pepper, probably a little bit more pepper than that actually. And then my noodles were cooked. I was also getting those done on the side. You can use any type of noodle you want in this. This is just the kind that I found I love to use for this particular recipe. So got the noodles rinsed off once they were done cooking. We are going to get everything added to a large bowl now. So you're going to add your noodles, your pre-cooked chicken, your pre-cooked broccoli, stir that all together, and then you're going to come in and top it with your Alfredo sauce. And you just want to get everything nice and stirred together. I decided that I was going to add a little bit of heat to this because I just love adding chili flakes to everything right now. So I'm going to add a little bit of red pepper flakes to this. And I traditionally used to make it using a Italian seasoning herb blend. I would stir it in, but Stephen is not super fan of it, so I just leave it out and then I just put it onto my portion. So you're gonna get everything stirred together and thoroughly mixed through, and then that is it. And again, I was topping it with a little bit of my Italian seasoning blend there, and then we had some bread on the side that I had made that day, and I love this meal. I cannot recommend it enough. It is so good and so easy. There are a lot of components involved to make it, but it really does come together very, very quickly. For the next meal, we are going to make a sweet and sour meatball. This recipe is great if you are going to a potluck or if you are hosting a party. You can customize the size of the meatballs and make them however you would like. I love this recipe. It is really, really good. So to start, we need to make some meatballs, but I had realized that I had some of my sourdough bread that had kind of gotten a little stale. I want to show you how I make my sourdough breadcrumbs because I'm always saying in my videos that I have homemade sourdough breadcrumbs. This is how I make them. So you just take some bread. It doesn't have to be sourdough. It could be any bread you'd like. Put them in a 400-degree oven. Just toast them for about 20 minutes. After they're done toasting, let them cool down just a little bit and then throw them into a blender. You could also use a food processor for this as well. I just find that the food processor doesn't get them as crumbly as I like. So I'm just gonna put them on here and blitz them for under 30 seconds, and that is how I make my breadcrumbs. Now, in order to make them kind of last a little bit longer for me, I do store them in the freezer. So I just added these ones to my breadcrumb bag and then I just squeeze the air out and I put this in my freezer, and I always have breadcrumbs. Let's get the meatballs started now. I don't have a set recipe to give you guys because I just make this off the top of my head. I just kind of cater it to whatever style meatball I need that particular time, but I will give you the general measurements that I'm using. So we're going to use 1 pound of ground beef. You can definitely use ground pork, venison, chicken, turkey, anything in this. It's really versatile. So you're going to use about half a cup of the breadcrumbs that we just made up, about 1/3 cup of milk. You can use plant-based, whole milk, doesn't matter. And then you're going to put in 1 egg, some salt and pepper. I used approximately about 1 teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of pepper, and then about 1 teaspoon of garlic and onion powder. Sometimes when I'm making the meatballs, I will put herbs in them like thyme, oregano, but because we were doing a sweeter dish, I decided to omit the herbs. So we're going to get them rolled into fairly big meatballs because we want to be able to have these like a meal. They're not really an appetizer. So I have my oven preheated at 450 degrees, and we're going to bake these, depending on the size you make them, for about 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, I just took them out of the oven and let them cool down. So I realized once I started getting everything all ready that I didn't have enough brown sugar to make this recipe. It calls for a lot of brown sugar. So we are going to make some brown sugar from scratch. This is how I always do it. You're going to just take a little bit of white granulated sugar and then add some molasses to it. Depending on how dark you want your brown sugar, I like a light tasting brown sugar. So I added probably about 3 tablespoons of molasses to about 6 cups of sugar. Just going to mix it together until it's all incorporated, and there you have your brown sugar. So to make this sweet and sour sauce, you're going to add about 1.5 cups of brown sugar to a saucepan, 2 tablespoons of flour. I'm just using an unbleached organic all-purpose flour, half a cup of vinegar, 1/4 cup of water, 2 tablespoons of soy sauce, and 1 tablespoon of ketchup. You're gonna put that onto the stovetop and you are gonna bring that to boil over medium-high heat. Once it comes to a boil, you are gonna remove it off of the heat, and then you are going to add your meatballs to a casserole dish. Make sure the casserole dish has a covering on it. This Pyrex one one works perfect. You're gonna take your sauce that now has been boiling and you are gonna pour that over top of your meatballs. Have your oven preheated to 350 degrees and you wanna bake these for 20 minutes. You can also do this in a slow cooker. It works perfect if you're making like the mini meatballs that you know you need a toothpick to pick up. It works amazing in a crock pot. I've actually taken this to many potlucks in the crock pot and it stands up terrific for that. One thing that I found goes really well on the side with these meatballs for some reason is carrots. I just love having carrots with it. So I had made some rice earlier in the day and so we just topped the rice with the meatballs and the sauce and had some carrots on the side, and it was just a really delicious meal. For the next meal, we are going to make a side of baked beans. I have had zero luck making baked beans, well, at least canning them. They always turn out really hard. So I thought I would try to make a batch just in my crock pot and see how they work. So I took 3 cans of my home canned white navy beans. You can use northern beans in this as well. The recipe that I was actually following recommended that you use a dry bean, but I did not have time to soak my beans, or at least I didn't plan to soak my beans the night before, so I chose to use canned beans in this. So I made the recipe just a little bit different than the recipe that I'm gonna leave linked for you guys. The other thing that the original recipe called to do was add 1 medium onion chopped to your baked beans. I obviously omitted that, just added some granulated onion. I added half a cup of packed brown sugar, 1/3 cup of molasses, 1 teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of ground pepper. And then because I wasn't using dry beans, I just came in with about 1.5 cups of water. And then I have a smoked ham hock that we just smoked the other day on our smoker. And so I added that into the baked beans. I put the lid on and I cooked these on low for about 6-ish hours. I kind of kept coming in and checking it. I realized after I got that all done that the recipe called to use about 1 pound of dry beans, and I realized I did not have enough in there. 1 pound of canned beans usually equals about 3 to 4 15-ounce jars or cans of beans. So I came in and added another jar of my canned baked beans. So this is about after, I would say 5 hours. I came in and took the skin off of the ham hock because I realized I had not done that, and I took the bones out. The other thing that after reading reviews, everyone commented that they added the tomato products after it had cooked down for quite some time, because the tomatoes are what usually makes the beans hard. And I've realized that that is my error that I have, is I always add the tomato products at the beginning, and that apparently makes beans go hard. So after I broke that ham up a bit, I came in and added 1 cup of tomato sauce, 1/4 cup of ketchup, and 1/4 cup of my homemade cowboy candy barbecue sauce. Just started up, put the lid back on, and then I left it for about another hour. So the other thing that we were gonna have with these baked beans on this particular night was a patty melt. I've never made patty melts before, and the only reason I decided to make them this night instead of a regular hamburger, because that's what I had originally planned, was because I was lazy and did not want to make buns. So I found a recipe to make a patty melt, and I thought, this is perfect. I have fresh bread. I might as well just make this. To make the patty melt, I used 1 pound of ground beef. You want to use a really lean ground beef for this, because the more fat in it, the more that melt or the patty is going to end up shrinking. So less fat in it, you're gonna get a true to size patty. I added a little bit of salt, pepper, about 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce, some granulated onion and granulated garlic to that, just stirred it all up, and then I formed them into large patties. You wanna get these things as thin as possible so that they cook really quickly in oil. So that's what I'm doing here. I have a hot cast iron skillet, and I'm just cooking them for about probably 5 minutes per side, because I've got these really thin. And the other thing too is, if you are not using a super lean ground beef, you want to just make sure you're shaping them larger than the slice of bread that you are going to make them into. This recipe also included a secret sauce to put onto the patty melt, so we definitely are going to try that. So to make it, you're going to use 1/4 cup of mayonnaise, 2 tablespoons of ketchup, 1 tablespoon of Dijon mustard, 1 teaspoon of pickle juice, 1/4 teaspoon of paprika, and 1/4 teaspoon of garlic powder. You're gonna stir that all up. The other thing the recipe did recommend to do as well was fry onions. I omitted that step completely. So I have my fresh bread here. I'm just getting it all sliced up. This is how I cut my sourdough bread, is with an electric knife. I have been doing this forever and it is the best trick ever. We cut into a hot fresh bread and it was so amazing. So I have some smoked cheddar cheese that we picked up from Azure Standard, so I'm gonna use that. You can use whatever type of cheese you like. If you wanna use like a regular cheddar, mozzarella, anything works for this. So you're gonna add the cheese, add the patty melt, add your secret sauce if you wanna add that, add more cheese, and then you are going to put the bread on top. The other thing I forgot to mention was I took my bread and I buttered both sides of my bread. I'm gonna add that to the same skillet that I just fried those patty melts in, and we're gonna cook it for about 2 to 3 minutes per side. You don't wanna burn it, you just wanna get it nice and brown, and you want that cheese to melt. After a little bit, I realized my cheese wasn't melting too quick, so I had to crank up the heat a little bit just to get it to melt. But there's the patty melt, and here is the baked beans. These things turned out so good. Steven said to me that I finally mastered the baked beans. So I think the trick is just with the tomato products not to put them in at the very beginning. I had some pickles on the side, and this meal was delicious. I don't know why I have never made patty melts before, but they are really good. For the last recipe, we are going to make a Norwegian dessert. This is the title of the name of the recipe. I'm not even gonna try to pronounce it, but the English version is raspberry custard bun. They're delicious. So to a saucepan, I am gonna get 1 1/4 cup of whole milk just heated to a lukewarm temperature. Once it is heated, I'm just gonna set it aside. Then to the bowl of the stand mixer, I'm gonna sift in 4 cups plus 2 tablespoons of an unbleached all-purpose flour. I'm also going to add in 6 tablespoons of a granulated sugar. I'm just using an organic white sugar or cane juice, and then 2 teaspoons of an instant yeast. Then I'm going to add 1 1/2 teaspoons of ground cardamom and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. What I'm gonna do is just put it onto my stand mixer, and I'm gonna use my dough hook, and I'm just gonna get that all incorporated with the dough hook. Once all of that is incorporated, I am then going to add in my lukewarm milk and then 1 egg. You wanna knead that on low speed for about 8 minutes. I don't really have directions for this recipe if you're not using a stand mixer, because the recipe does just strictly speak to using one. You could probably do this by hand, but you would need to knead it for a little bit more than the 8 minutes. So after the 8 minutes, you are going to cut in 1/3 cup of lightly salted butter, and you just want to have it into small pieces, and you're just going to knead that for about 5 more minutes. I actually had to come in and just kind of help the dough a little bit absorb some of that butter. After the 5 minutes, you're going to take the dough out. It's going to be nice and elasticy, and you're going to transfer that to a lightly buttered or lightly coated bowl and cover it with a tea towel and let it rise in a warm spot for 1 hour or until it is doubled in size. You want to line your baking sheets with some parchment paper, and then to a small bowl, we are going to add 4 tablespoons of room temperature butter and 4 tablespoons of brown sugar. What we're making right here is just the topping that's going to go over top of the dough. So once your dough has doubled inside, you are going to take it out and you are going to roll it to be approximately 20 by 15 inches or 50 by 38 centimeters. And then what you want to do is, once you get it to that, you're going to take that stuff that we just made with the butter and the brown sugar, and you are going to spread it evenly across the dough. This did not make enough. It did not even make half enough to even cover half of it. The other problem that I had was my butter was not warm enough, so it was really difficult to spread out, but I doubled the recipe and then I melted it just a little bit, and it went on way easier on top of the dough. So once you get it spread evenly across all of the dough, you are going to take about 1 1/2 cups of roughly chopped frozen raspberries, and you're just going to spread them on top of that mixture. Then you want to tightly roll this up. You almost have to pinch the edges as you are rolling it up because you need to get it nice and tight. So the recipe says that you're going to get about 12 pieces out of this. I got way more than 12 pieces, so I just kind of went with it. The shapes I made were perfect. And then you're going to put these on your lined baking sheet. Now, and I will make these again, I am going to actually probably put put everything onto one and put them really close to each other, because what happened is they ended up just spreading apart, whereas if I had them in like a cake pan, they would have been nice and close together. So you're gonna cover those up with a tea towel and you're gonna let them sit for about 40 minutes. While they were resting, we are gonna get our custard made. So I took 2 cups of whole milk and 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. You can actually use half a vanilla bean in this as well. So we're gonna add that to the stovetop, and then we are going to cook that until it just comes to a nice light boil. Then to a large mixing bowl, we are going to take 2 room temperature egg yolks, 1/3 cup of granulated sugar, 2 tablespoons of cornstarch, and we're just gonna whisk that until it is thoroughly whisked together. Then what we're gonna do after the milk has come to a nice simmer is we are gonna slowly temper that in with the eggs. You want to just do it really, really slow, otherwise you're gonna curdle your eggs. Once I got everything incorporated, we're gonna add it back to the pot and we're gonna stir this until it is nice and thick. The recipe says it takes about 8 minutes. Honestly, for me, I think it took about 4 minutes and it was to the thickness that I wanted. So you're gonna take that off of the heat, let it just cool just a little bit. And then we're gonna get an egg wash made. So I just took 1 large room temperature egg and just whisked it and set it aside. At this point, you wanna preheat your oven to 400 degrees. And we're gonna take a small spoon and we're just gonna put an indent in the middle of the bun. The first couple ones I did, I hardly made an indent at all. And then the last ones, I realized I really needed to make like a huge gaping hole in the center to fit more custard, because the recipe says you're supposed to be able to fit at least 2 tablespoons of custard in these buns. So I just made a huge hole, and then you're just gonna kind of dump the custard in until it fills it. Once you get them all full, then you're gonna take your egg wash and then you are going to coat them all with the egg wash. You wanna bake these for about 15 minutes or until they're nicely browned. So this is what I was saying by they just spread right out. Next time I make them, I'm gonna cook them way closer together so that they don't spread out as much. Once they have cooled a little bit, you're just gonna dust them with some icing sugar or powdered sugar, and then there is your dessert. It is so, so good. They're not overly sweet because there's not a lot of sugar in them, but definitely amazing recipe. So this is the last recipe on this video. I hope I gave you guys some inspiration for your upcoming week, and thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys have a great day or night whenever you're watching this, and I will see you on the next video. Bye guys.